Thanks, Millie. It's obviously a real pleasure to introduce Eric Swalwell, Congressman of the 15th District. Our congressman, as we think. I also want to acknowledge the work that Mike Margaret did in getting Eric to come. Mike would do the introduction himself, except being a congenital Republican. For a variety of religious, social, and economic reasons, he would hand off to a congenital Democrat. So that's how I'm here in place. Now, Mike, you and John did a remarkable performance. And I'm going to caution Congressman Swalwell, and I think only Michael Faruqi will know this phrase. There's an old phrase in vaudeville, never follow a dog act. Okay? I think you can work it out. I knew Mike would know it. It's a real pleasure to have Eric here. I guess I can call him Eric. We've known him since he started to run. He has had a remarkable first term. In his first term in Congress, he actually got legislation passed. Yeah. There are members of Congress who serve 15 terms and never get legislation passed. And the treat about having Eric here is that he's back here a lot. I have no idea how he survives. We see him regularly, and it's always a pleasure. We had him out to our house in the spring when it looked like he might need a little help in the primary. Turned out he didn't need any help in the primary. That worked real well. But the best thing about him is he has a wonderful self-disparaging sense of humor. And when he introduced himself, he said, my career took an interesting turn from kid over in San Ramon to playing soccer for Maryland, to going to Maryland Law School, working as an intern for Ellen Tauscher, back out here, distinguished performance as Associate DA in Alameda County. He said, but both of my parents are serious Republicans. And so when they see D next to my name, the reaction is disappointed. So I don't think I need to say a thing more. Eric, come on up.
Thank you, Jay, for that introduction. Thank you for inviting me. Also, thank you, Council Member Gary and Chief of Police here, Harris, for being here today. And Mike, thanks for being such a good friend and someone who's not afraid to speak candidly to me on anything. And I know that doesn't surprise any of you, but I was here 2 years ago as Mike's guest, and I'm happy to be back. And Mike, I'm happy to tell you that the only person that holds my feet to the fire more than you is my own father. And last December, I took my parents to the White House for the White House Christmas party, and they were thrilled. They'd never, really been able to go inside the White House. The first congressman they ever met was me. So I took my parents to the White House, and at this Christmas party, you're kind of moving around at the different rooms, and I'm walking my mom and dad around, and I see just kind of out of the corner of my eye Nancy Pelosi, and I figured, this would be a good opportunity to introduce my mom and dad to Nancy Pelosi, the Democratic leader. And right before I do that, my father spots the official presidential portrait of Ronald Reagan. And he doesn't know that I want to introduce him to Nancy Pelosi, so he calls my mom over, he hands her his cell phone, and he says, Vicky, get a picture of me posing in front of Ronald Reagan. So there he is, and I don't see him doing this, but I'm bringing Nancy Pelosi over. My father is posing right in front of Ronald Reagan's portrait in the White House. So even in the White House, you have a faithful the person holding my feet to the fire, keeping me honest as a Democrat. So I wanted to come here and update you on my first 18 months in office. I was sworn in January. Jay, you were out there. Pat, you were out there. And we've made, I think, some good progress, and I wanted to give you just an update on the first 18 months. We've held 14 town halls. Actually, that's 15. I held one yesterday. I've got one tomorrow night, and we're going to have one the following week. Tomorrow night we'll be in San Ramon. The following week we'll be in San Lorenzo. And I think showing up and facing the time-honored American tradition of the August recess firing line, as I call it, and really answering to your constituents is part of this job. And I also find that what my mom told me as a boy, which is, Eric, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them in proportion. serves me well at these town halls. And so I really tried to use them as an opportunity to learn as much as I can. Also, I have, throughout the last year and a half, every month gone out and worked a different job in the shoes of my constituents. I call it In Your Shoes, and I will perform a number of different jobs. I've worked as an ambulance driver. Be lucky that you weren't on the road that day when I was out there driving an ambulance around Livermore. I've worked as a teacher. I've worked at an ecological preserve in Hayward. I've worked as a chemist at a laboratory. And what this does is it allows me to see what my constituents go through and on a day-to-day basis, the workforce issues that they're facing. And so if you have any ideas, please send them our way. I really do enjoy going out and seeing the different jobs and learning what I can do better to help the workforce. I've also attended hundreds of community events. There's the donut wheel there in Livermore. We had Donuts with Your Congressman right there on First Street, and then we hosted a Women's Business Empowerment Day at Cal State East Bay a couple months ago, and we have a veterans event coming up next week where we will be doing a veterans jobs fair here in Livermore. Also, I have visited every city council across the 15th congressional district, either in person, as I did here with the Livermore City Council, and also via Skype. I've used technology the way that the business community, the way parents who send their kids away to college, the way that military spouses use video technology to communicate. I've done the same thing, and I've been able to update every city council through video Skyping or in person, just to kind of take their concerns so they can relate them back to their constituents. Just some other numbers I thought that would be of interest. I've introduced 8 bills. 2 of them have passed the House of Representatives. The one that I think is of note and substance was a typhoon relief bill for the Philippines. We have one of the largest Filipino districts in the entire country, and after that typhoon, I saw hundreds of people in our district who had family members over there and wanted to help, and so this was an extension of the charitable tax deduction from 2013, so anyone who made a contribution into 2014 was able to count it in 2013 if it went to typhoon relief. So just an effort to kind of boost our own aid and the American Red Cross's efforts to encourage giving. The other bill was naming the longtime post office that I grew up that never had a name after Jim Conan. I don't know if anyone knew Jim Conan. Jim Conan, Mosquito Abatement Board, a veteran, Eagle Scout, just a tremendous individual. So that passed the House. It'll be up for a vote in a few weeks in the Senate and hopefully signed into law. But the Philippines contribution bill, that was signed by the President into law. Also, 305 bills that I've worked on with other members of Congress, and Mike, 2/3 of them bipartisan. So I think that working with your colleagues is important in this environment. I'll talk about that in a moment. Also, and I'll talk a little bit more, but veterans right now, I think more than any time in our history, need our care and attention, and our office has delivered over $1 million in owed benefits and claims back to veterans. And so these are on the claims side. You hear a lot about the backlog, as well as also on the healthcare side. So our office, we have a veteran, an Iraq war veteran who works in our office. He, I think, relates and identifies well with the veteran community. So if you have any veteran claims, please let us know. We do take those very seriously and have strong relationships with the VA and are just as frustrated as everyone else about the backlog and the inability to move these along. 2 issues, I went to Congress not expecting to work as much as I have on aviation security. And when I made this presentation, I didn't even know that a woman would board a plane from San Jose to Los Angeles without a ticket on Southwest just 2 days ago. But being on the Homeland Security Committee, whether it was a proposal about a year ago to allow knives back onto planes, which I opposed, and led an effort in the Congress where I got 155 Republicans and Democrats to oppose it as well. Unfortunately, they rolled back that provision where they were going to allow knives back on planes. To the teenage stowaway who breached the perimeter at San Jose's airport. And since then, I have called for and have seen implemented a private-public partnership pilot program to look at better ways to use technology to protect our airports. And now, with this woman going through 2 layers of security, 3 layers of security to get on a plane and fly to Los Angeles, clearly there's more we need to do to make sure that only screened and ticketed passengers are able to get on airplanes. But what I learned talking to San Jose airport officials is this woman in the most recent instance, she went and followed a family as they were going through TSA security checkpoint, and as that family huddled around the security screener, she maneuvered around the TSA screener, and then she did the same thing at the gate as a family approached to board a Southwest flight, and she was able to get on the plane. And she's been arrested about 8 times before for doing this, and she's harmless. Fortunately, just looking for a free flight, but we may not be so lucky next time. And so I do think the American public has to have faith in its airport security. Otherwise, extreme measures end up going into place, and that'll cost more money and take more time at the airport. I've given a number of floor speeches and have talked about oftentimes Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory and Sandia Laboratory on the floor during the government shutdown. Of course, because the laboratories are government-owned, contractor-operated, they were furloughed, and the shutdown did affect government contract employees, and so that was important to me. And so I've tried to do everything I can with being informed by the lab experts or the retirees that are available to highlight the importance of the work they do, not just for our energy security, but also our national security. I'll talk a little bit about the Philippines bill, but also just recently we were able to support a BART grant application for hardening and protecting the Transbay Tube. Millions of passengers every year ride from the East Bay to San Francisco through the tube and back to the East Bay. And BART has identified vulnerabilities for our own security, and so they've received now $30 million, and they are undergoing a project to harden and better protect the tube. And so we led the effort on that and have been working with BART. I just want to talk about my legislative priorities, which conducting these town halls, going out and talking to my constituents, I think reflect the priorities of my constituents. And the top priority still remains local economic development. Now, the Tri-Valley is doing pretty well. The unemployment rate from San Ramon, Dublin, Pleasanton, and Livermore, when you average those 4 cities together, it's just over 4%. We are doing pretty strong economically. I think the biggest challenge in our area right now is affordability, especially in the housing market, inventory in the housing market, and transportation. 580, the 580, 680 interchange right now remains, a real nightmare to get through. And so local economic development, I think, can be hindered if employers do not see this as a place where their workforce can afford to live, or it's a place that's taking too long to get to. Recently, we have supported legislation. I introduced legislation, I wrote legislation that would allow any city that lost redevelopment funding to apply for an already funded economic development grant at the federal level. So this is no new tax dollars being spent. This is existing programs that would allow any city like Livermore that lost redevelopment money to apply for economic development administration funds. And so we've seen collectively $100 million in my congressional district that were lost when the state took away redevelopment money. And so this is an effort that would hopefully supplement some of those projects, not be a complete cure-all, but it's supported by the California League of Cities, and we're working to move that through the Congress. Clean energy sources. I see this as an issue where right now, to address climate change, I don't think this has to be a proposition of kill all jobs in oil and gas or not address climate change. I think we have to do everything we can to start to change the calculus and move toward an all of the above energy production model, which means understanding fossil fuels are not going to go away. We're not going to pull the plug on them overnight. However, this area, because of the brain power, largely at Lawrence Livermore and Sandia, and our research universities, this area, because of its forward thinking, this area, because of its capital in the investors who live in this area, can really lead the way to make sure that the United States is energy secure in the future. Fortunately, I've been able to work with Sandia and Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories on their clean energy projects. I'm the senior Democrat on the Energy Subcommittee, on the Committee of Science, and I really believe that we can address climate change and also create jobs in wind, solar, and storage. And right now, the biggest challenge, the biggest hurdle is when the wind is not blowing and the sun is not shining, it's very hard to store the energy that has been produced by wind and solar. And so really working in the storage area to make sure that you can capture and keep those renewables is going to be critical. And the laboratories are doing great work there, and my goal is to take federal funds, invest in the laboratories, but make sure we get that research to the private sector who can do a better job of getting those technologies to market as quickly as possible and create jobs. And I have great interest in continuing to do work in that area, but I'm most blessed that I have a constituency that is so forward-looking and works so hard in this area. Finally, comprehensive immigration reform. I think, and I have seen going to the southern border, I was just down in Texas about a month ago, we have an immigration crisis in our country. And it's a crisis of humanitarian proportion in that I saw 400 children that had crossed the day before I'd gotten there at a detention facility, coming from 3 countries, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, where they were escaping the highest homicide rates in the entire world. They were passing through Mexico, a country that was essentially looking the other way and not stopping them or doing anything. And these children were coming to our country seeking what each and every one of us was by and large born into, freedom and opportunity. And what I have learned from that experience is that to fix this humanitarian crisis, it's not going to be easy. It's going to take hard decisions. But I do believe that the false choice of allowing every child who comes into our country to stay or turning around every child who comes here back to the country that they came from is really dividing us and tearing us apart. And it doesn't have to be that way. I think we can have a process where on a case-by-case basis we are looking at each child, where they came from, what they face when they go home. We can treat them humanely and with dignity and return those who do not have an asylum case and treat those who do have an asylum case the way that we've always treated refugees in this country, whether it's from Cuba or Africa or Vietnam. And I think we can do that by taking some of the charge politics out of it. I think one of the biggest myths that I've heard and that has been perpetuated is the border is not secure. And I talked to the border agents. I talked to the border chief in McAllen, Texas, where this is happening. And the border patrol agents told me, they said, our apprehensions have never been higher. That these children are running into their arms, to the arms of the border agents. And so I believe that putting more resources in the processing of these children, in investigating their claims and learning who they are so that we can send back those who don't have a claim and we can keep those who do, would be better spent than just doubling or tripling the number of border agents on the border. So I think we can do this in a smart way, but I think the overlying component of this is having an immigration system that addresses the 12 million undocumented individuals in our country who I believe, if we put them on a roadmap to citizenship that is earned, that is not free, that is not a rubber stamp, that requires a background check, that requires not getting in front of anyone who has gone through the ordinary routine process, that is a humane way of dealing with this, and more importantly, for people who would be fearful that this could affect our own jobs here, I think all of the economic studies I've seen show that having immigration reform would help our economy. I visited in Livermore about 6 weeks ago, about 8 weeks ago, an insurance company in Livermore where the owner came over from India in 1987. This owner, who came from India, his name's Jasbir, came to our country in 1987 and drove trucks. 6 years, up and down I-5. And for 6 years, Jasbir swore that he would take every dollar he saved and every free moment he had to find a business model where he could spend more time with his family and have a higher quality of life. He decided that insuring the trucks was a better way to go than driving the trucks. It was safer, more time with his family, more money. So after 6 years, Jasbir saved up enough money to open up a couple 100-square-foot office in Oakland and signed a 6-month lease. For 6 months, he couldn't find a single client. And finally, the landlord said, Jasbir, you're not finding any clients. I'll give you probably 1 more month, but I'm going to have to kick you out. Jasbir said, just give me 1 more month, I'll try and find a client. So he searched, looked, went around and found his first client, and then his second client, and then his third client. And pretty soon, he started to get his business off the ground. And 21 years later, his member of Congress visited him at his 60,000 square foot office in Livermore, where he has 60 employees who he signs the front of the paycheck for. But back in 1987, I think all of us, if we were looking at Jasbir on paper, would think that Jasbir was a bad bet for America. If we were to allow him to become a citizen, he would just drain our resources and not give anything back. But his story is one that we've seen all across our country, which is that immigrants risk their lives, give up their livelihood, leave everything behind to come here. And if they're going to do that, chances are, if they go into business, they're going to create jobs. And so I want to have an immigration system that protects the border, that doesn't give anyone a free pass, that has them go through a process, but that understands and embraces that we are a stronger country economically when we embrace a culture of immigrants. And we should not be feared, because if we can make the pie bigger of opportunity, if we can make the pie bigger of what we can give our children, we won't have to fear how small the slice is for each and every one of us. So I think we can do this in a smart way, and I'm working to do that in Congress. A plan passed the Senate with 68 votes, Republicans and Democrats. I think the House owes it to the American people to work on its own immigration plan, and I hope to continue to be a part of doing that. Finally, I just want to say we owe it to our veterans, as I mentioned, to do everything we can to stand up and serve them. And if you are a veteran and are here today, thank you for serving our country. And I'm sorry that we haven't served you as well and as much as you deserve, because these backlogs of over 365 days to file a claim, these 90-day, 120-day wait times at our hospitals are not befitting of the service and the bravery and the honor that you went through to ensure that each and every one of us continue to live free. So I've been working. We have a new VA director in Oakland. I think that's a positive step forward. We had a great backlog before this director, and I hope we can bring that down. But it is important to me, and I'll reiterate, if you have a veterans claim or know someone who does, please let us know. I'm going to skip ahead here, just finally end with keeping my pledge 2 years ago when I came to this club. I've tried to do everything I can to work with Republicans. And the first thing I did when they sent me to congressional orientation with 80 other members of Congress, they send you to Harvard University. And I think my own parents are more excited that I got into Harvard than being elected to Congress. But at Harvard University, on the last lecture of the last day, the lecturer told the group that if this Congress, the 113th Congress, behaves like the last Congress, debt and deficit will rise, and the American confidence in the Congress and markets will fall. And so he challenged us to find new ways to work together. So 4 of us, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, got together and created a small working group. And we pledged to do 2 things. 1, to meet more often, and 2, to grow the group. So week by week by week, we met in small, tight quarters, and we each were responsible for bringing in a new member. One week it'd be in a Republican's office, the next week it'd be in a Democrat's office. Pretty soon we got to about 20 to 25 members and decided, let's put pen to paper and state what we believe in. So sitting in a tight, hot room, 20 to 25 of us, with half of us being lawyers, no offense, no offense, Mike, and myself included, we were able to hammer out 5 different principles that we could agree on, from strengthening and preserving Social Security to necessary spending cuts we have to make. We grew the group week after week and continued to meet. We announced ourselves as the United Solutions Caucus. We have 38 members today. We had a meeting a couple of months ago with the Heritage Foundation and the Center for American Progress, so a conservative group and a liberal group. And they presented jointly on what we could do to work together. And remarkably, the meeting lasted longer than 45 seconds. So that gives me hope that there are still ways that this new Congress of 80 freshman members can work together. And I know that my own parents at our weekly Sunday dinners will ask, son, what are you doing to work with Republicans? And I'm proud that I can tell them, we've got this group. We're not going to change Congress overnight, but we have changed the tone, at least among our class, and we have a working relationship that hopefully will serve us well in years to come. So with that, I'd like to thank you again for having me and take any questions if there are any. John Shirley.
You know, I like your immigration ideas. What's the chances of some of those passing after this November election?
You know, there's a lot of talk about what will be done in that they call it the lame duck Congress. You know, basically after the November 4th election and before the January 3rd swearing in of the 114th Congress, there's this idea that because you have so many retirements, people leaving Congress, there will be more of a will to act and get some of these tougher decisions done when the political consequences won't be as high. The problem with that is that it seems that every tough decision has been kind of kicked into the category of we'll solve it in the lame duck Congress. And so I just believe we have to have certainty in our immigration system right now. We have worked on hundreds and hundreds of cases just as an office, and because of the uncertainty that is around our immigration system, I think it has put us in the position that we're in, and we owe it for our own security to have certainty, and I think we owe it to the people who have been here and have been working hard and playing by the rules to have certainty. Frankly, I don't think it's going to happen in the lame duck Congress. I hope it does, but unless a political price is paid in November, I don't think there's going to be the will to act and do anything about it.
Any other question? Larry?
Yes.
Beyond the group that you have just talked about, do you see any hope of working past the increasingly polarized Congress?
Yes, but what I will say is, what I fear is the real problem here is, and it's on both sides, is the outside influence of money being spent in politics. In 2010, a Supreme Court decision called Citizens United said that any outside group can spend unlimited amounts of money to influence elections. And we saw $6 billion spent in the 2012 elections. And what that has done is, when you are a Republican in a very conservative district or a Democrat in a very liberal district, you're not necessarily as afraid about being unseated by someone from the other party. Your fear is what they call being primary, having someone in your own party run against you. And so your willingness to work across the aisle is minimized when you're always looking over your shoulder because outside groups are coming after you. I want to give you a quick example of something disappointing that happened 2 weeks ago. Rare earth elements.
Oh, yeah.
Our cell phones, our anti-missile systems, our laptops, our jet engines rely upon about 17 rare earth elements to power them. These elements are many of the elements I didn't learn about or study in my chemistry class. But these elements are critical for American manufacturers. The problem is that 98% of them come out of China. I learned about this from the San Francisco Chronicle series about 2 years ago, talking about how China choking its exports was costing American manufacturers. So I introduced a bill that said the Department of Energy should use existing programs to work on rare earth elements. And I actually put in a loan guarantee part of that bill for anyone that wanted to invest in rare earth elements and look at mines across the country. The Republican Science Committee chairman in Congress told me, he said, Eric, I like your bill, but people in my party are very wary of loan guarantees because of what happened with Solyndra. If you take out the loan guarantees part and just have the Department of Energy work on this without spending new money, I can get your bill on the floor for a vote. And I told him, sure, I want to just see progress right now on rare earth elements. I'll take out the loan guarantee part. Kevin McCarthy, the majority leader for the Republicans, who's from Bakersfield, he also agreed to put it up for a vote, and he supported it. And the chairman of the Science Committee, a Republican, supported it. And so this bill was put up for a vote 2 weeks ago, and the morning before the vote, a couple hours before the vote, 2 outside organizations, Heritage Action and Club for Growth, sent out what's called a scoring alert to its members, including the members of Congress, that said if you vote in favor of this, you will be scored negatively. So their report card that they issue to their members would give them a negative report for voting in favor of this, even though the majority leader of the Republican Party and the science chairman were supporting it. So my bill, which was negotiated for about a year, supported by the Republicans, failed by 9 votes. And what was most disappointing was when I went up to my colleagues on the floor of the House of Representatives, my friends on the other side, and I said to them, can you support my bill that's coming up for a vote this evening? The number of people who looked me in the eye and said, Eric, I like your bill, but I'm afraid of how I'm going to be scored. It was like a punch in the stomach, because they weren't opposed to the bill, but there is this fear, and I understand their fear, because if they have a low score from Heritage on all the bills that they vote on, they're going to invite a primary challenge, and then these outside groups will spend millions of dollars against them, and they'll be penalized for working across the aisle. But it was just, I was surprised at how many of them could openly say that was their fear. And so the bill failed by 9 votes. It was something that the Republican leaders and the Democratic leaders agreed on. But the influence of these outside groups, I think, needs to be reined in. And the only way we can rein them in is by agreeing that corporations and any other entity should not be treated like a person and have unlimited abilities. Thank you again. And please don't hesitate. I'll put my contact information up there. Let me know if I can ever help. But thank you again for having me.